All right. What? Why? It's terrible. But now, a very good story, you gotta start at the beginning. So, we'll talk about my conception. How's that? No, because realize when I was first diagnosed as a cyst, you'll be happy to know, all right, that they didn't recognize what it was, because my mother was having all sorts of difficulty. We all have heroes in our lives, but it was one of those things where the doctor told my mother that there's no way that you or your child is going to survive. So this is how my life began. And of course, the doctor, this is before abortion is legal throughout the whole nation, but that doesn't mean it wasn't legal in other areas. So the doctor tried to encourage my mother to go across state borders to a doctor that could fix the problem. Okay? But she, being a good Catholic, holy woman, told the doctor exactly where he could go. But you have to realize that there was 9 months of fear, of anxiety, of prayer, and she had all these different people praying for her. So that factors into the whole thing as well. But you have to imagine my 4 older siblings, those that were old enough to understand their own fear and anxiety over what was told was going to be the death of their mother, and what my father must have thought. But we proved them wrong. My mother survived. I obviously survived. And then my mother's pains really began. Okay? So it's God's providence. You all heard the line from Jeremiah, "Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you." And so I'd just like to start with that story because, for most of my life I had no idea about my vocation or anything like that. But God knew. Just as with all of you, He has a great plan for you. You just don't know what it is yet. Okay? But it's there. There's no question. And this is the next funny part. So, because we were able to survive my birth, at my baptism, which was very early on, November, just a few weeks later, so I never, my parents did not tell me this, but after I was born, after the baptism, the sisters of St. Joseph, Chestnut Hill, that were there in the parish, insisted that they take this little bundle of joy and place him by the tabernacle. Right? And then they brought, they knew all that she had to go through. And so then they had her bring the child into their chapel and do the same thing. Place him up next to the tabernacle. So giving this child back to God. And the thing is, it wasn't until I was ordained a deacon. Because slides, you know what slides are? You ever see those little slides, the old things? Look, my father tortured us, having to watch the slides of our trip every time we had people come over. But because of slides, I never, and I was the 5th child, but by that point, there were hardly any pictures. I never saw a baby picture of myself until, for diaconate ordination, they were going through and they're digitizing slides. And it's like, oh, look at this, we forgot about that. Had no idea. No one ever told me about this. It was not working in my subconscious. Oh, my mother didn't tell me every night, we stuck you up at the tabernacle when you were little. I think you're going to be a priest. No, but there was there was such a good, and actually my parents, there was never any sort of pressure. So they never really, I can't remember them ever saying, you'd make a great priest. Always knew when something like that happened that they'd be thrilled. But there wasn't ever any pressure. So God knows what He's doing, and grace abounds. The prayers of others affect our lives. Now, the Lord knows what he's doing. And in terms of vocation, I always kind of thought about it, but from a very early age, you're not going to have a major conversion story. You know, I'm not Patrick Rice. I didn't get knocked on my backside because I was stubbornly resisting. I actually loved the faith, and I enjoyed the priests in my parish. I was blessed by having very good holy priests growing up. They were diocesan, and I was an altar boy, and I always thought this, you know, would be a good life. But I didn't necessarily consider it all that much. I thought about it. A friend of mine in high school was sort of considering it, and I was kind of watching him because he went off to college seminary when I went off to CUA, thinking, the Catholic University of America. You know, if I'm meant to be a priest, we're a better place, but if I'm going to meet the woman of my dreams, a good Catholic lady, where better to do that than the Catholic University of America? So this is what I'm thinking. And so sure enough, I did meet somebody, right? So dating, this long sort of tense kind of romance, not sure, you know, just all that awkwardness. Okay? It was all right there. It was great fun. But I just have to tell the story of my first kiss. Now some of you heard that before. But the reality is, at the end of the first semester, right outside her dorm, we went to go see Dances with Wolves. Now I'm really dating myself. So we're standing outside, the dim light of the building next door. So the night goes on and on. No one has the courage to do anything. Then quick kiss, and she runs. I had no idea didn't know what I did wrong, but found out later it's because she would run and tell her friends. Finally, I had the nerve to do this. It just took me months and months. But the funny thing is, this happened. That building that was sort of casting the light onto the porch of her dormitory, the building was called the Dominican House of Studies. Yeah, that's funny. So it's just one of those things that when I look back, I think, Lord, you really knew what you were doing. You really knew better than I did what I thought. And I think that's one of the most important things to ever remember as you sort of struggle to know what to do, whether it's what to do tomorrow or what to do for the rest of your life. God made us to be happy. And if He knows what's going to make us happy, even more than we do, it makes sense to listen to Him. Now, I've been a slow learner. So twice to Catherine of the infamous story I just told, and Rachel, twice I was almost engaged, looking at rings, everything like that. Okay, so you're praying. I'm praying to God, saying, is this what is meant to be? And the answer was no. That's the answer she gave. But both times was dumped. All right. So rejection and sorrow plays a big piece in it, and it happens in different ways to all of us. At some point during our life, those of you parents might have gotten a divorce, something like that. You already know that feeling. But out of the worst struggles in our lives come some of the greatest graces. And I can still remembering, I was still in college towards the end, and having had my own sort of love rejected, it dawned on me what sin was. That as much as I might have loved Catherine and had it refused, how much more does God love me, and every time I sin, I refuse it? That was such a hard reality for me to come to realize, because all of a sudden it became difficult. There was not. It was a good relationship. It was a holy, healthy relationship. So when I say that my sins felt so heavy on me, it's not because objectively they were that bad. But subjectively, I knew what I was doing to my God when I sinned, whatever it was. And it even became hard to pray. Now, this is a temptation of the devil. I'm not saying this is a good thing, but I was able to realize what my sins did. And it was actually that time that I was sort of forced, because of my own sort of psychology, to turn to the Blessed Mother. And so there were so many days of walking across the campus to the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, anybody that was on the March for Life trip. But in that beautiful church, just walking there, praying the rosary, because it took a full 5 decades to get from my dorm to there, to go to Mass. That in the midst of pain, by being open and recognizing that God was faithful, all sorts of amazing things happen. I wish I could somehow make you remember that, because you're going to go through pain. A loved one's going to die. You're going to get a bad diagnosis from the doctor. You're going to be in physical pain. Whatever it may be, those are tremendous moments of grace. God is always faithful. And so from that, you just manage to pick yourselves up. Now, the second relationship, which proved God's faithfulness, I could see this. Because this was even better. I mean, this was a young woman really on fire with love for God. And we had all sorts of plans. She helped me start a youth group. She was actually doing youth ministry as a young electrical engineer. But what happened, my oldest sister, who I was very close to, who was my godmother, 15 years older than me, she died in a car accident. Okay, we were very close. And her husband had ran out on her, so she only had 2 children, and they were in high school at the time. And so I had to then raise them. But it was only about two weeks after my sister's death that Rachel, that just the stress of the relationship, broke it off. And so once again, dumped, sort of 1-2 punch. It would almost have seemed too much, but the reality was that I knew the Lord was ever faithful. And so, even though at that point, I remember sort of fighting with Rachel, she said, I think you should be a priest. Okay, and so at that point in my mind, I thought, there's no way, no way, it's never going to happen. So just resisting it. But by prayer, there were no great signs. There was no voice like Brother Paul heard. There was nothing like that. But there was always these constant signs that had been going on throughout my entire life. So a little while later, I decided I'm going to offer to my youth group to take them to World Youth Days in Paris in 1997. Okay? Were all of you born by then? Okay. But I'm just feeling old, that's all. But of course, everybody was interested. But everybody backed out, including my own nephew and niece. My nephew had gone off to college, but my niece backed out as well. There was another young woman interested in me, but I agreed to, she was helping me, agreed to take with me. But I decided, I'm going. I'm going to World Youth Days by myself. Technically, they're really for young adults anyway, so I'm going. And I'm an electrical engineer, and I'm making a ton of money. And I can do so. So I'm going to. So I took a 3-week vacation. But the one place I always wanted to go, that I just sort of grew up hearing stories about, was Lourdes. So I figured, I'm going to France. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a trip before the World Youth Days to go to Lourdes and experience it. And so I do. So most of you know that, well, it's the great irony, but I'm going back there, leaving on Friday for meetings, and that little book on the podium, it's for petitions. So tonight, before you go, if you have anything, write it down, because I'm going to leave it with Our Lady. But, so, I get to Lourdes, and I was told, I well, 2 days, that's plenty of time. It's nowhere near enough time. But doing everything they say you're supposed to do, go to confession, and then go to the baths. So if you don't know the story, Our Lady appeared to Saint Bernadette, and at one of the apparitions, she told her to drink from the water. She goes walking to the stream. Our Lady, no, over here. Bernadette digs in, finds mud, tries to drink from it, but from that hole, water just started to flow, and it continues to flow to this day. And they tap into that, and miracles have happened associated with that water. But they tap that water into the baths nearby. And there, all sorts of miracles happen. And I've seen it. But my first time there, going to line for the baths, and what does that mean? That means you have to wait about 2 or 3 hours. They shove one of those signs, 2-hour wait from here. You sit there, and it's an interesting experience. Because it's kind of like what it looks like you right now. But you're all from different countries. And you're all trying to pray languages and sing hymns in your own language. Okay? It's a bit like Babel. You don't know what's going on. But I'm there by myself, and just no idea, couldn't talk to the person next to me. I don't know what he's speaking. But you're shifting your way down, weaving your way through. And so you have you're forced into praying. And you start thinking to yourself, all right, God, I've been thinking about a vocation. Maybe heal me from my diabetes. Maybe I'll go and become a missionary. Or there's, maybe if I heal my knees, maybe then you want me to do this. So everybody else is sort of bargaining with God too. You're thinking that, but then you're there long enough to start thinking, well, this is childish. I should just be blunt about what I want. And then I'm looking around at all these people, and I was just overcome with a thought, truly inspired. I don't think it came from me. Mary, my mother, look at all these people. They're all coming to you wanting something. Every one of us. We're all asking something from you. When I go into those baths, I don't want anything. When I go into the water, I'm giving myself to you. You do with me as you will. Now, I'd like to actually describe to you what I experienced that first time in the baths, but I really can't. It was something perhaps maybe mystical. I don't know. I really can't explain it. There was no warm fuzzies. There was no lightning bolts. There was no music. But it was just a very profound experience. It's the only time that I entered into that water and didn't want to hyperventilate because it's 55 degrees. Okay, it's really cold. But from that moment on, just the doors opened. Just sort of the floodgates of grace and everything just sort of began to come together. But so much of this was just everything materializing that had been part of my past. But just trusting in Our Lady, she led me to begin to understand some of the graces. All the little ladies in my parish that would say, "Oh, you make a great priest." Those in some ways were signs. But it's not what we're looking for. We all want great signs. I don't know if but I'll just tell quickly my favorite story. I told those that went to the encounter, but a new lady, she was praying. She received at the end of the novena red roses. She knew she was being married. She received white roses. She knew she was to be a sister. At the end of the 9 days, prayer, her grandmother gives her this great giant bouquet of red and white roses. So the Lord never takes away our free will. There are people that have signs that make it just very clear what they're supposed to do. But for many people, it doesn't come. So I had asked for signs. But finally, just in my own prayer, my own thinking, my own society, that I just need to do this. I'm skipping over lots of parts of the story just for time, but my encounter always was thinking back of the Dominicans. And so it was on November 20th, just not that long after, what was that? August World Youth Day, November 20th, I asked for my application. Okay? Now, I'd asked for signs, there had been none. But the very next morning, November 21st, is the feast of the presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. I did what any sane man would do when he had just asked for an application from the Dominican order. I panicked. Okay? I really did. It was sort of fear, frightened, jitteriness that I never experienced before. It might even have been unearthly. Okay? But there really was this tremendous fear. And so on my way to work, like I often did it, I went to Mass. And I did something that none of you would ever do. I wasn't paying attention to what was going on in Mass. Okay? So instead, I was looking over to Our Lady's side, to the right, just like it is in our church, and I was praying to Our Lady. I'm saying, Mother, what am I thinking? You know, oh, my niece, she still has one more year of high school. How could I possibly leave now? Who's going to take care of my parents in my old age? The only sibling I would have possibly trusted this with was my sister that passed away. You know, all these sort of things are racing through my mind. And then I said, you know, I've asked for signs, I haven't gotten any. You know, couldn't the gospel be, I don't know, what's that difficult one about family? You know, who's my mother, my brother, my sister? No sooner had I done that than the priest gets up. Kind of a strange priest too, my dad. But he reads the gospel. Who is my mother? Who is my brother? Whoever does the will of my heavenly Father is brother, sister, and mother to me. And so a tremendous amount of peace came over me. And of course, when I got home, I ran and looked at, you know, what's the message say? That wasn't the reading of the day. You know, it wasn't later that I realized that he picked it from the propers in the back. But so fine, I think it gave me some peace. It helped me get through the first couple months of the novitiate of joining the order. But this is the fun part. When November 21st came up again during the novitiate, you know, you're already missing Thanksgiving with your family. And also reality. And you know you got a job that would pay you anything to come back that you enjoyed. Okay? There was a young woman who was interested in you. All these sort of things. And you think to yourself, why am I still here? And the second reading during Matins, the officer meetings in the morning, was just this beautiful passage by St. Augustine explaining what the Lord means when he says, who is my brother, who is my sister, whatever I didn't say. But whoever does the will of my heavenly Father is brother, sister, and mother to me. So that's just a little consolation to help me in my own vocation, but I cannot speak enough of the tremendous graces of what has happened to me, especially as a priest. Nor can I tell you, there's no way any priest can convey to you the graces we experience on the other side of that confessional screen. Just fatherhood and experiencing the Lord's mercy, and sometimes recognizing miracles and having somebody say to you, Father, what did you say? I've been hearing those words in a dream for weeks, and I have no idea what they mean. And the sort of things that just give you the willies. But I have to end with what was truly the one thing that went with me throughout my entire discernment, my entire life, my struggles and sufferings, my failures. That one thing was Mass. Because as a child, you know, as an altar boy, and they started at an earlier age, you know, just entering into that mystery in just a very childlike way, but growing into it. There's that one thing that always was a constant. That God's love was always there, and it wasn't an emotional high. There was no charismatic movement in my area. That, there was no praise and worship. There was nothing of some maybe the emotional experiences you felt. But there was the reality of our God being present and how powerful that was. The witness of other people and the priests that I knew in their love for the Eucharist and the knowledge of his being there. And just now my privilege in being a priest and bringing God to you. And all the times in the Dominican House of Studies where we learned our secret ninja training. But with that, I've been talking with Patrick about adoration because he too, has great love of the Eucharist. There's a hymn that I want you to know, partly because it's my favorite hymn, right? But it's a beautiful hymn. How many have heard "Let all mortal flesh keep silence"?